On April 9th, 1494, Alonso de Ojeda left La Isabela with 400 men. Colon himself then reports what happens. He writes, there were over 2,000 Indians, all armed with javelins, which they launched from slings much more quickly than from a bow. And all of them were painted black and other colors with fancy glass beads, mirrors, masks, mirrors of copper and gold on their heads, letting out frightening screams as they do at certain times. One group had planned to wait on the field for the horses and tip them over by jumping on them. They tried to carry out their plan, but it was the horses that ran over them as they stood in their way, and the horses collided with them and killed them. It is believed that this, in San Tomás de Jánico, is where this actually happened. Because the Tainos concentrated on attacking the horses and inadvertently ended up unaliving themselves, they lost the battle. And Columbus considered this a miracle. He was so excited. He was like, yes, God is on our side. And he writes, it is a miracle of no small importance that a few Christians could escape a multitude of people sworn to their death. Ojeda himself was able to capture 3 important people. It says that he was able to capture un cacique, the brother of the cacique, and his nephew. They don't write down who these people were, though, so we don't have an actual idea of what cacique this was. We just know that he placed them in chains and he brought them to Columbus, who was actually back at La Isabela because he didn't actually accompany him to this battle. Ojeda was cruel enough to have one of the prisoners sent back to the nearest village and had one of his men cut off his ears. He took the other prisoners back to La Isabela, where Colon was at. Columbus was so upset at having to deal with them that he actually ordered for these prisoners to be taken into the public square in La Isabela and beheaded. No longer were the Christians just seen as a nuisance that was invading. They were a real threat. La Casas takes this event as proof that the indigenous people had a right to defend themselves. But Columbus's main concern was to continue exploring. Remember, he thought he was still in Asia and that he hadn't found the mainland yet. So he left La Isabela in hands of his brother, Don Diego Colon. He also left basically a council in place with Diego. And the council was made up of Fray Buil, Pedro Fernández Coronel, Alonso Sánchez de Carvajal, and Juan de Lujan. Colon set sail on a Thursday, April 24th, 1494. He took 3 ships with him and headed to Montecristi. Next day, he entered into a nearby harbor and he expected to find Guacanagari because remember, he had forgiven him. They were supposedly still allies. But when Guacanagari saw the ships in the harbor, he fled. Colon sent his men out to see what happened, and Guacanagari's people said, oh no, don't worry, he'll come back. So Colon waited, but by Saturday, he's not coming back. So he decided to continue his traveling and headed for Tortuga. The next couple of months was him just traveling around Cuba, trying to figure out if it was the mainland or if it was an island. He was gone for approximately 3 months. But again, on this trip, he fell severely ill and he even went blind. His crew became scared because he could no longer direct them. But with the help of the Indian guides, they were able to turn back around and head towards La Isabela. They arrived back at the fort of Isabela on September 29th, 1494. Colon was so weak from exhaustion, malnutrition, that he ended up having to be carried into the fort. And he would continue to be sick until the next year in February, around February 1495. For reasons that we don't know, Guacanagari decided to reach out to Colon after hearing that he had come back from his trip. He wanted to again let Colon know that he had nothing to do with what happened with the people at La Navidad. He didn't encourage any cacique to slaughter them. He explained here in La Isabela that because of his ally status with Colón, these other caciques, again, Caunabo and Beecho, decided to take him on as an even greater enemy. Beecho had actually killed one of his wives, and Caunabo had stolen another. So he now asked Colón to please reunite and help him to gain revenge against these two caciques. So we could probably assume that the reason he showed up was because this had happened to him during the time that Colón was away. Colón also writes and says that Guacanagari wept each time he recalled the men who had been killed at La Navidad, as if they had been his own sons. Colón, along with his brother Bartholomew and Guacanagari, devised a plan to get revenge against Caunabo and Beecho.